Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, StayNTouch Cloud PMS Configuration and User Training Series, Front Desk Operations, presented by StayNTouch Implementation Consultant, Chris Devlin. I'm your host, Erin Fisher, the content writer here at StayNTouch. Today's presentation will cover Front Desk Operations in StayNTouch Cloud PMS. In this webinar, we will cover the following topics: check-in and check-out, room diary, room moves, quick post charges, cashier functions, and actions manager. We will have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Feel free to submit questions throughout the presentation, and we will answer them in the order they are received at the end. And that's all I have right now. Chris, I'm going to hand the presentation over to you.
Thank you so much, Erin, and thanks everyone for joining today. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen and we will get kicked off. So today we're going to be covering lots of operational aspects of the system. As Erin mentioned, things like checking guests in, checking guests out, how we can use things like the room diary and different aspects of the front office menu to make life a little bit easier for our operations. So some of this might be familiar to you, obviously the check-in flow and such. And some of the screens will be different based on some of the settings that you have active, things like signature capture, terms and conditions and such too. But I just do want to highlight some of the things that might make your life easier as we go through the process. So the first thing I want to talk about is the pre-arrival process, how we can best set up our arrivals for success. And one of the most important tools for that is our arrivals report. And the arrivals report we can have run when you would like it to be run, by going to reports and new report. And we'll select arrivals. You can search for it in the search bar or just simply choose it. And on the right hand side, you'll choose your arrival date. And under options, it's important that we actually select our guest notes, res notes, actions, and potentially also show guests. If you marked VIP only, that then would be your VIP report, for example. Again, if we did schedule this report using the report scheduler, we can have it go to a specific email box, and that can be set with these defaulted for you already each time. But we'll go ahead and run this report, and we'll go to our reports inbox. I'll quickly refresh this, and we'll click into the report. And what's really nice about this report is that you can obviously see all the specific information that we need to know about these guests, the payment information, if we need to block particular rooms, if they have allergies, whatever it might be that's important for different departments to know. And we can also click in directly to a specific reservation by selecting the guest's name and make any modifications to the reservation directly from the report into the stay card. We could go ahead and reassign the room if we wanted to. We could add a note, we could add an action, any changes that are necessary, and then actually just click back to our report. So we can see how that could be very useful, for example, for a morning stand-up meeting, if we have to flag a guest as a VIP, for example, anything like that. In addition to that, we can also go to our room diary, which is under the front desk menu, into room diary. And in this screen, we'll talk about the screen in a bit more detail in just a moment, but I do want to highlight that we have this option on the right-hand side, which is our unassigned reservations. In the unassigned reservations, you'll see all the reservations that have not been blocked into a room currently for the date that's selected. Now, this hotel is actually a little bit in the past, the business date, and these two reservations have not been assigned rooms currently. I can click on an individual record, and it will show me rooms that I can assign to that reservation based on the room type. But I do also have the option to do an auto assign of all rooms that are unassigned for that date. And it will take into consideration things like guest room feature preferences that are marked on the guest card, things perhaps like a high floor, low floor, or specific room feature preferences you may have for your property. If that's checked off on the guest card, it will factor that in while making these assignments too. With all that done, let's actually take a look at some check-ins. So we'll go into our arrivals tile. And here you can see we have 4 arrivals, 2 of them under Christopher Devlin, who's a VIP and has stayed 14 times previously, as indicated by this 14 and the VIP indicator. So we can welcome him back. And it looks like Katie Brennan is arriving under Microsoft. And we have John Smith with a test group and StayNTouch company. And those rooms have not been assigned. Let's actually go ahead and check in Christopher Devlin. So I'm going to select the first record here. So a couple of things to note on this reservation. I have blocked this room with do not move, room 16, and you can see the padlock icon here. In the current reservations, there's 2 arrivals, as you can see by this green indicator with the arrow pointing down. With the arrow pointing up, that's actually a departure for today. So these 2 that have the arrow pointing down, you can see that they're both hard blocked. We have some actions and notes which we'd want to look at. So let's take a look in here. Action says, please call manager to meet guests on arrival, decision maker for potential group in 2022. So as we check this guest in, we'd want to complete this action to mark that off once we've called them. Let's actually go ahead and check the guest in. I'm going to click on check-in on the right-hand side. It's going to prompt us for any missing guest data. If we have an email address on file, that's great. If we have a mobile phone on file, that's great. Maybe we want to also get a home phone number for this guest. Some of these can be marked as mandatory too, and we can add things like vehicle registration number, for example, if that's a mandatory requirement for your property. But we can ignore and go to check-in if we have sufficient information, and it'll also prompt us for upgrades. In this case, we've actually specifically blocked a room for this guest, so we don't want to change the room assignment. So we're going to say no thanks, proceed with check-in. Now at this point, a deposit has been collected for this guest already. You can see it listed on the registration screen. And there is a Visa card on file. So we're just going to simply click on complete check-in. Review CC authorization. Charges from another room are being routed to this reservation. That's interesting. Let's take a quick look. If I go to if I go to incoming billing information here, actually on the right-hand side, it's telling me that Christopher Devlin, room and tax from room 16 is being routed to this reservation. So when I click on complete check-in, I can go ahead and take full auth as per set rule 100. It's just alerting me that there are incoming charges from another reservation coming into this reservation. Now, I don't actually have a credit card terminal associated with my laptop here, and this is a training environment. So I would, at this point, want the guest to insert or swipe their credit card. There's a lower per transaction fee when we do this, and when it comes to chargebacks, you're more likely to be able to justify the transaction when it's captured on check-in as an event. So this is the point at which we want to capture the credit card. But for these purposes, I'm just going to use the card on file. We have our successful authorization, and we can click on continue. And with that, the guest is checked in. We can see the indicator on the confirmation number is now blue. The room number is now black. And then where we had check-in previously, it now says checkout. If I wanted to check in the second guest, I can easily toggle over to there, click on to check in, go ahead and submit here. Once again, we're not going to upgrade this guest because they have 2 rooms close together. We can complete the check-in, and we can do incidentals only in this case for this particular guest. We got our successful authorization, and the guest is checked in. If the authorization did decline, it would halt the check-in process at that point and prompt you to take another method of payment from the customer. We are going to check in one more guest. We're going to check in Katie Brennan, who's here with Microsoft. And we'll notice that there's a routing indicator also on this reservation, no room assigned as yet. We have some notes here. It looks like room and tax to company guest pays incidentals. So let's go ahead and check in Katie. We could put in a phone number. We do have to assign a room, so let's go ahead and take the first room from our list, room 21. And here you can see on the registration screen, bill 1 has a Visa card for Katie on there, and bill 2 is set as direct bill. If we want to know what charges are being covered by direct bill, we can click into our billing information screen, and we can see that room and tax looks like it's being covered by Microsoft on bill 2. With that, we can go ahead and complete the check-in. And again, some charges for this reservation are being routed to a company or travel agent or an account. So we're going to go for incidentals only. Now, on my property, it's saying $50, and that's because that's the defaulted amount that's set for my property. That might vary for your property depending upon the configuration. Let's take our incidentals. We'll have Katie insert her card at this point. And we have our authorization successful. If you have a key integration, it might also prompt you at this point to cut keys for the room too. That would be a secondary pop-up that would happen at this point also. So we've gone ahead and checked Katie into room 21, but Katie has gone up to the room and discovered that the lights are not working in the room. There's an issue with the electricity in the room. So we want to go ahead and move Katie to a different room. So how would we do that? Actually, very simple to do. We just need to select the room number that she's currently blocked in. And we can go ahead and select a different room from the list here. If we wanted to change the room type, we could certainly do so. We could move her, for example, maybe to a Classic King if we have one available. Let's see. Looks like I don't have a Classic King available. I do have a corner room available. So I'm going to choose room 4, the corner room. Looks like there's no difference in price. They're both $9.99, so I'm going to confirm that. And we'll see here that the original room type was bunk. We now have Katie in a corner, so it does indicate that there has been a change of room type on the stay card itself. We would probably also want to put a little note into Katie's stay card saying service recovery, electrical issue, oh, I'm sorry, I can't spell today, during stay in 2021, offered room move and guest was satisfied. Important information to know for any future stays that the guests may have, that this happened to them. When we do a note on the guest card, it does stamp them with the user's name who left the note, as well as the time and date that was left. Okay, so we've moved Katie. Now let's take a look at some of our in-house and departing guests. If I jump over to my departures, we're going to take a look now at Katja Lindemann, who is an Expedia merchant card guest. So she was checked in through Expedia. One thing I do want to point out is within the CC Auth tab to the right of the payment method here, we do have an option where with each bill window, you can associate a credit card. So if I go into the bills here, we'll see bill 1 is always the guest bill, and we have an American Express card for Katja on here. And bill 2, we have a Visa card, the virtual card for Expedia, ending in 1111. We can add credit cards to bill windows simply by clicking on the plus sign and then adding a payment method, choosing the credit card, and then entering the information or having them enter that into the actual terminal or swiping the credit card. Once you have that bill created and a credit card in place, you can then go into the CC Auth tab here, highlight that bill window, and then authorize an amount on that credit card that is selected or added to that bill window. And in this case, I'd actually authorize the amount on the Expedia virtual card on bill 2, and you see that matches the balance amount here. So when we come to check this guest out, we have an authorized amount that matches the balance, and we can check that out successfully. Incidentals only for 50 on bill 1 for Katja. So let's actually go ahead and check Katja out. We just simply choose the checkout option. She has no incidentals on bill 1, 0 balance. Email bill 1 to guest email is always checked off by default, which helps to save paper. But if we do want to print an invoice, we can certainly choose the blue invoice button here. And from here, we can again email, or we can choose print, and we have different types of layout that we can choose as well. So detailed bill with items, which we'll talk about in a moment, summary by charge code, summary by day, as well as a pro forma invoice, which is an advanced invoice. We could print that out, and we could send it to a local printer. No charges to display on this particular invoice. So we can just review bill 1 and continue. We'll see that it says SR here for bill 2. And the reason it says SR is because this particular rate for Expedia merchant card is a suppressed rate. So everything is hidden. And it's hidden on screen because the system is both staff facing as well as often guest facing. And we want to make sure that there's no way that the guest can see what those rates and price points are when they are suppressed. So it does say SR here. We can review bill 2 and continue. The credit card on file is there. We see the amount to pay. We can make the payment. And it's going to bring us to bill 3, which obviously has nothing on it. So we can review bill 3 and complete checkout. Most of your properties will not have this room status update. It is an option that you can turn on for each checkout to update the room status. I have this on my training environment just to make life a little easier for me, but go to dashboard and stay on guest bill is very useful because you can stay on the guest bill, for example, and then go back and print out that invoice if the guest would like to have a copy, even though it has been emailed to them automatically from the system. If I go back to the stay card for Katya, if you did want to see the bill that has SR on it, it is important to note that you have this SR view rate option. The rate itself says SR here, and if I click on SR view rate, it will expose the rate for me. So as a staff member, when I know that the guest is not looking over my shoulder, there's no way that they can see this if I'm using an iPad, for example, then I can go ahead and click on SR view rate. And then if I go into bill and charges, having clicked that, notice that it no longer says SR here, but does actually expose the full values of the actual rate amount. Perfect. Let's take a look at a direct bill checkout. So we'll go back to our departures. Actually, just going to refresh this screen very quickly because some of the icons are not resolving correctly, and that's because of my browser. I apologize for that. Perfect, there we go. So let's jump into Joe Manette. He's with Microsoft and he's checking out of room 23 today. So the guest balance is 0 and we see routing, so we can pretty much assume that there are no incidental charges here for Joe. So let's go ahead and click on checkout. And as we suspected, no incidental charges and direct bill on bill 2. So we can review bill 1 and continue. And we can review bill 2 and complete checkout so long as everything is okay with our invoice here. We just have the room charge, city tax, occupancy tax, and our local taxes for New York City. If everything is good with that, review bill 2 and complete checkout. It will automatically settle to direct bill. It won't prompt us for a payment method on the direct bill window. Let's now take a quick peek at how we can deal with posting and adjusting ancillary charges. So I'm going to jump into our stayovers and we'll pick on me. Let's go into room 14 here and we'll go into our bill and charges. So we have our deposit payment here. I'm going to use this add charge button on the left hand side and I want to post parking to this particular account. Now here you see a list of what are called items. These are our favorites that are, specifically these are our favorites that are the most commonly charged things from my property. Might be things that are sold at the front desk. It could be things from a gift shop, for example. Each property will have a different list of items, and these can be configured in the back end under financials and items with a predefined price point, which is overridable. So for example, I could choose Pringles, and it'll give me a quantity of 1, which is selected here. And I can keep clicking on that to make it a quantity of 2. So now it's at $7.98. But if I made a mistake, I can just simply click on the back button to go back to $3.99. The price can be overridden by selecting PR for price. Maybe I can make it $2.99 instead. And if I wanted to make this an adjustment as opposed to a posting, I can put in the price first, followed by the negative, at which point it becomes an adjustment. If active for your property, adjustment reasons require the user to select from a predefined list of adjustment reasons, which is great for reconciling the cause of your adjustments. So by forcing your users to select from a list of 5, 10, 15 specific reasons, you can then reconcile and say most of our service recovery, most of our adjustments, for example, are because of service recovery versus posting errors versus rate reconciliation, whatever it may be. In this case, we're going to say this was a posting error, and then we could put in a reference and say what that error was. You could decide to show that reference on the guest invoice and post the charge. So that's a super useful tool there. That's if you're posting an adjustment directly. That's one way to post an adjustment. But we're not posting an adjustment right now. We're actually going to go ahead and post. I'm going to delete that out. We're going to go ahead and post parking. It's not on my list here, so I could click into the drop down and look for it. There it is. But if I'm just under all charge groups or even under favorites, I can just search for it. I can search for the name or I can search for the code, whatever makes most sense. So let's choose parking. I want to post $50 of parking, but I'm going to intentionally make a mistake and I'm going to post $500 of parking. And there it is on the bill. Oops, too much money. We didn't mean to post that much money. I don't want the guest to see that we posted 500. I want them to only know that we posted 50. So I really want to split this charge into two separate transactions. So how do we do that? We have our purple pencil to the right of the transaction. I can click in here. I have 4 options. Most users will not have all 4. The 2 most important being the lower 2, split charge and edit charge. The first one we're going to use is split charge, and we can split by a percentage or by an amount. And in this case, we're going to use an amount because it's not an even split. We want to split it by $50 so that we're left with one posting of 50 and one posting of 450, which is the one that we're going to remove. So let's split that charge. And there we have it. It's being broken into 2. I'm going to take this 450 and I want to move it to a new bill window and then bring it down to 0, adjust it off so that the guest is not responsible for it. 2 ways I could do that. I could click on the plus sign first and then move it to bill 2 by clicking here and selecting bill 2. But I don't have to create bill 2 first. I can just actually click into the drop down and say to new bill, and it'll create that bill for me. Lo and behold, it's been moved over to bill 2, and that's great. The guest now just sees the $50 of parking, but we do still need to take care of that charge. So we're going to jump into bill 2. I'm going to expand this out. And again, we could click into add charge. We could choose parking. We could say 450 minus, choose our reason, posting error, enter a charge. That's one way of doing it. We could also click into the pencil. We could select edit charge. And in the amount where it says new amount, this is where we can say 0. We don't need to do any math here. It's asking us how much would you like this charge to be? And if you notice at the bottom, adjustment negative 450. That's exactly what we wanted to do. So it's doing the math for us. We're going to select our adjustment reason as posting error, overcharged. We don't want that to show on the guest invoice. The guest isn't actually going to see this invoice, so that's fine. We're just going to change the amount. And if all goes to plan, the guest balance here on this window is now 0, and we're all set. When it comes to checking guests out, we do not automatically email bill 2, bill 3, bill 4, and so on to the guest. Only bill 1 is automatically checked off. So you would have to intentionally email bill 2 to the guest for them to see that. So there's no danger of them becoming aware of the fact that we accidentally posted $450 too much in parking for them. How do we move charges around? Let's say that it'd be a little strange to do so, but let's say that we wanted to take these 2 charges and move them back to bill 1. How would we do that? We can actually select individual charges and click on this transfer button, or we can select all charges on a bill and select this transfer button. And we can move them between bill windows on an individual account. We can also transfer them between accounts. So if, for example, and again, this is probably not something we would really want to do, but if we wanted to move this from room 14 to room 16, we can go ahead and choose the other guest and select move. Now it's going to disappear from this bill. And if we jump into room 16, oops, that's the wrong one. Here you can see 0 balance, but parking overcharge adjustment posting error, parking overcharge adjustment error has been bumped over from the other account to this account. All these bills also can be made full screen if you are presenting this on an iPad to the customer too. And also, as a good point of note, for very large bills, there is a tally or a total by charge group listed on the top of each bill window that shows you the sum by charge group. Now, obviously, this is zero balance, but it could be room charges, taxes, food and beverage charges. So when it comes to things like group posting accounts and such, that's a great way to say the total bill is 20,000, of which 15,000 is room charges, 4,000 are taxes, and 1,000 are porterage fees, for example, whatever that might be. We can also do fast posting to accounts. If I go to our front desk menu and select post charges, notice we have room number, guest, company, or travel agent. And this screen is very similar to the one that we saw within the account. And just to highlight that it doesn't need to be within the account, let's actually go to the dashboard and do this. We'll go back into post charges. And let's choose, we'll pick on me again. Let's choose Devlin. And we'll go to room 3 in this case. And we'll again choose parking. 25. Post charge. Do you want to post another charge? Sure. This time it's going to be under Katie's room. Parking 25, post charge. So you can see how this would be very useful if you had a list that you got from a vendor, for example, for parking, maybe laundry charges. Some hotels will post newspaper charges, for example. So this is a way that you can do that very rapidly without having to go into each individual guest account to do so. As a point of note, if a guest account does have a cash payment method on file and a restrict post toggle, it will prompt you and let you know that postings are not permitted because the guest is on cash basis. But if the user does have permissions to do so, they can override that and they can still post to the guest account. Interfaces wouldn't be able to post to the account, but users with permissions can post directly in the PMS if required. Let's now go back to our room diary and take a look at some of the other features that we have within there. So I actually have it open up over here. So we took a look at our unassigned reservations already. You can do unassigned reservations not just for today, but also you can change the date and look at future dates and go ahead and assign reservations in bulk for all future dates if you want to, just by toggling through here. And you can also search, obviously, using the search bar. The room diary itself is similar to what other systems might call a tape chart or room diagram. It lists out your room numbers on the left-hand side and your dates along the top. And you can toggle between a 7 and a 21-day view. You'll see the room status is listed here. So here you can see this orange room, for example, is in a clean status. This green room is inspected. Or you see gray, it's out of order. And red background is a dirty room. That's useful just to see as you're looking at your current status. And from this screen, you can also update the housekeeping status. So if, for example, my standard Queen 12 was dirty, I could click in here and I could mark it as dirty. I could also change the service status from in service to out of order or out of service from this screen. Mostly you'll be using the housekeeping screens to do this, but it is nice to know that you can do it from this screen too. We can change the date that we're looking at or from using the calendar option here, and we can also search for a specific guest here. So if I go ahead and type in a name, I can see all matching records. And if I just want to, if I want to select Aaron Fisher's record, for example, I can go ahead and choose that, and it will go ahead and highlight it for me. And then I can do things like move room, access the stay card, and so on. What we can also do from this screen is toggle over to book. This is a great option if I want to book a specific room for the guest. So even as a walk-in flow, this can be useful. So let's say that we wanted to book Junior Suite 19 and check the guest in directly. They're coming in today for one night. I can choose Find Rooms, and I can book Junior Suite 19. And by selecting this, it will actually take me through the flow, show me the available rates for that Junior Suite. So we'll take our standard daily rate, and we'll go through the process. We'll enter our credit card. I think I should have one on file. I do. Perfect. And if we go to the stay card, the guest has been blocked in Junior Suite 19, which is inspected, and I can even go ahead check them in. In this property, we actually have signature capture and terms and conditions active. We'd have them insert their credit card, authorization successful, go ahead and cut their keys. They'd like to have 2 keys, we'll print those out. I don't have a key encoder attached to my laptop, so that's just, we'll use our imagination for that. And there you go, we've checked them in. So we created the reservation, we blocked them in the room, we checked them in as a walk-in flow. That's a great option. And last but not least, we want to review our actions manager. This is the bread and butter of the operations for the property. If we go to our actions menu and into actions manager, here you'll see all the actions or the to-dos for each department or the property as a whole for any given date. So I only have one for this property for today, which was the one that we had on that reservation for Christopher Devlin to call the manager on arrival. But you could see you could have for housekeeping, maybe to defeather rooms, you might have notes to place extra hangers in rooms, deliver rollaway beds, remove rollaway beds from rooms, back-to-back reservations, a whole host of follow-up items, maybe even for the finance team to reach out. Could be about collecting deposits, a whole number of things can be assigned to specific departments. And these are the departments I have built for my property. So we can specify, I only want to see my front desk actions for today versus the entire hotel. I can also change the date that I'm looking at. So if I want to review tomorrow's actions, the day after, and so on, I can see that. And we can print these out using the print button too. Additionally, we can also set this up as a schedule. So you can have, for example, the housekeeping actions delivered to the housekeeping email address, or go to a Google Drive, a Dropbox, and so on a schedule each day so that they have their actions for that particular day. And then they would just come into the actions manager, and as actions are taken care of and completed, they'll just be marked as complete in here, and you can see who completed it, when it was completed, the date that it was completed, and the time that it was completed. And if we now actually go back to the stay card, we can see that this has been completed, and it's now in green. The real benefit of that, as opposed to using things like Outlook calendars and such to keep track of things, is that it's all consolidated and kept within the PMS, so everyone has oversight of it. So if someone was to take vacation, for example, it'll still get actioned. Even if it's a year from now, if it's 6 months from now, it's in the system and it will appear on that given date. So with that, we've covered the basics of checking in and checking out. We've looked at posting charges directly into reservations, how we can post them quickly using the post charges functionality, how we can do removes. We've looked at the room diary, how we can make bookings in the room diary, and how we can do the auto assignment. And we've also looked at our actions manager. Some good tips and tricks for front office operations. So with that, I'd like to pass it back over to Erin just to open up the floor for any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you, Chris, for that insightful presentation. I'd now like to turn to the floor for some final questions. Remember, you can submit questions through the question box in the middle of the control panel. So our first question is from Jillian. I assume this is for when you're adding charges. Why not just delete the charge?
Why not just delete the charge? That's a great question. So lots of properties will have that option. So if I go in here, and I'll just show exactly what Jillian's talking about. This parking charge, for example, there is an option, remove charge. And if I do that, I can put in a justification, did not use parking. And it's gone from the bill, which is perfect. A lot of hotels will use this functionality, and that's great. And it's still traceable as a charge and an adjustment under financials and journal. Just taking a little while to load, but we'll see the posting and the adjustment in our journals, in our revenues and adjustments for the day here. Under parking, It's in there somewhere, and maybe just not have the right date selected. But the issue is, well, not the issue, but the reason that some hotels prefer not to use that option is just because it's no longer on the guest folio. So from a forensics perspective or a traceability perspective, it's a little harder to keep track just because it's no longer on the guest folio. That's really the only reason. But there is an option, and if your property would like to use it just to make life easier, you're absolutely welcome to.
All right, thank you. And then the next question is from Mary Lou. Credit card authorizations can only be modified for in-house guests, correct? Not after departure?
That is correct, absolutely. Once you've checked a guest out, any authorization that you're holding will be released. That's a great point, yeah.
Thank you. And then Samantha asked, is there any way to unmask a credit card?
Actually, no, because when we put a credit card number into StayNTouch Cloud PMS, we immediately, we don't actually store the credit card at all. We immediately receive a token from the credit card processor. So what we house in the PMS is not the credit card itself. It is just the token. If you do need to get the full credit card data, depending upon the processor you're using, if, for example, it's Shift4 Merchant Link, which many of our properties are on, if you have data such as, let's just jump into an example here. If you have data such as the last 4 digits, the authorization code, and the amount, as well as the date of the transaction, you can actually call the Shift4 Merchant Link support line, and they will give you the full credit card number so long as you can provide them with this information. If you needed to use it on a different account or a different reservation, for example. But within the PMS itself, for security reasons and PCI compliance, there's no way to unmask the number.
All right, thank you. And that appears to be all of the questions right now. I'll give everyone a few more seconds to enter those. Oh, and then Samantha asked again, can you make the email field mandatory?
Oh, in the guest card, I believe, let's just make 100% sure. I've never tried to do that before, but I believe if we go to cards, and if you go to guest card fields, let's check this. Guest card fields. I don't believe at this point we can make it mandatory, and it might be intentional purely because we might end up having to put in placeholders, and that might just end up being, what would be the right way to put it? If we make certain fields mandatory, sometimes we just end up putting kind of junk values in there, and then it becomes redundant information. But that being said, if you did make it mandatory and you had a specific placeholder that you always used every time, then that could still be useful for you. So I think that's a good suggestion, even though it doesn't look like it's something we can do right now. It's definitely an enhancement request that we can put in to make that an option for you. So that's something we can definitely mention to the product team.
All right, thank you. And then Selena asked, can you remove a credit card from a reservation?
Can you remove a credit card? Yes, you can. So if you have permissions to do so. So there is a permission under permissions, which is called remove credit card from stay card. And with that permission, let me just make sure in my property here, I actually have this permission. Remove credit card from stay card, there it is. And if I go to a reservation that has more than one credit card on there, let's just jump into John Smith here. So there's a Visa card on here. I can't remove it right now, but if I change this to, let me try this real quick, change it to cash. Now I can remove it by clicking on the X because I have the permissions to do so. there's an associated transaction with it, it's not going to let me, as long as there's no transactions associated with it, but we've actually processed a transaction on this particular account with that card, so it's not going to let me remove it. But so long as you haven't used that card on it yet, then you certainly can. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then Samantha asked, is there an email address report we can pull? We have to upload emails nightly into our travel media portal.
So there's a few options for that you could use. If it's guests who stayed yesterday, you might want to use one of the shell exports that we have. If you go under reports and schedule a report export, you could use, for example, under scheduled exports, something like the Clairvoyx stays exports. This was designed for a specific integration, but if you take yesterday, that would give you email addresses of guests who stayed yesterday, for example. But don't forget, you also have this great option for custom exports, where you could create an export very easily with reservation data or stay data. And you could say, select all the fields that you want, obviously including email, and then you would set filters such as departure date yesterday, email yes, includes email yes. So only guests who checked out yesterday that had an email on file, and then you would just have an Excel list of all of those set up for you. And that's very simple to set up. If you need any direction on exactly how to set that up, if you go to our knowledge base, which you can access from the login screen itself, go ahead and search for custom exports, and we have a whole host of different resources here for you to take a look through to see how to set these up. Any other questions, Aaron?
No, none right now. So I'll give everyone a few more seconds. All right, since there are no more questions, I'd like to take to the floor to offer some final thoughts. So in this webinar, we covered check-in and check-out, room diary, room moves, quick post charges, cashier functions, and the actions manager. With that, I'd like to conclude our presentation. Thank you all for coming. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email me at erin.fisher@stayintouch.com. Thanks again.